This sitting is resumed. Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you. I wish to indicate the joy and happiness in my heart as a result of these two very important aspects of the legislation that will help to guide us as a society, particularly when it comes to entreating to our children, and of course, including all adults who will be engaged in helping us with the rearing of our children. But I first want to say how grateful we are as a people, as a government, to be able to engage all those various individuals and groups in relation to the Joint Select Committees and of course the Child Care Board and other entities that would have been engaged in bringing us thus far. We are extremely grateful as a government, and it shows that we believe in democracy and the engagement of other entities in the society to help us to be able to come up with the legislation and all the other aspects of importance that will help us to be in a safe and a more conducive society. Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that the advice, the support, the ideas from the public as well were very instrumental in helping us to be able to come thus far. Indeed, the Honourable Minister and Member for St. Michael South and his team and the Child Care Board and the other entities related to children would have also played their role in helping us to come to this very important milestone in the history of Barbados. Our children are special gifts, Mr. Speaker. They are precious. And God has given us children to be able to allow our society to continue to grow from strength to strength. Without children, then all of us in here would just go to the dirt, and there would be nobody to carry on the mores, the values, all the important things that are necessary for the development of a society. So I am indeed grateful too for the advice of our colleagues here and others on the outside who would have been so instrumental in assisting us, giving the ideas, the advice, the support, and all else that goes with it. So I want to thank Almighty God, Mr. Speaker, this evening for having given us the privilege to be able to match many other countries in the world when it comes to the protection of their children. And of course, our society, who are the ones in this particular instance that will be working with our children and our youths to let them know that they are next in line to be the parents and guardians and leaders of the future. There are scores of Barbadians, Mr. Speaker, who have freely given of their knowledge, their skills, their services, their advice to ensure that these aspects of this legislation create more stronger, more reliable, and informative base in the rearing, supervision, and the overall performance and development of our society. And therefore, I welcome these aspects of the legislation, these two important aspects, with open arms and with joy to see that we have come thus far, having been relying on legislation for many years ago when our societies were so different compared to the present situation. We all know, sir, that the society and the world generally is changing. And of course, those mores, those values, the morals, and all other aspects that were able to be put in place to build stronger societies are now diminishing. And I believe, sir, that as a proud and progressive society as Barbados is, we must continue to cooperate, to collaborate, and to ensure that we raise our children to become the best upright citizens, parents, leaders, workers, guardians, and role models. Our children in Barbados, as is in the rest of the world, really need it now more than ever. And a lot of this is to do with the impact as to what is happening in the outside world, we call it, where the technology seems to be taking over almost everything. And while the technology has good components, there are so many negative sides of it that I shudder to see what is happening with some of our children. They are using the technology, and sometimes parents are leaving the technology to help them to rear the children. So I see babies, 6 months and a year old, with the technology in their hands. And as soon as mommy says, or the caregiver, give me that device, they cry, they scream, they dribble, they do everything, because that is helping to stimulate their minds and to give them the kind of entertainment and enjoyment they want. But at the end of the day, we need to wean them off and make sure that there's quality time spent supervising them as they use their little tablets or whatever they call them. I'm not so sure, Mr. Speaker, I'm from the other old age, and so I'm not so sure what you call them otherwise, but it is the technology that is helping them to rear the children. And it seems to me as though many parents and guardians now are giving over their responsibilities because a child must keep quiet. What about rocking the baby and singing lullabies and teaching them songs and hymns and teaching them to spell? Their young children who will spell C-A-T, cat, D-O-G, dog. Where's the dog? Which is the cat? Touch it in the book. A few of them hardly have books, but we will leave them to be nurtured using the technology in their cradles or wherever they are in the house. And I think that is something that we need to watch very carefully, because the discipline is not there, and then we want to chastise the children through some other form or means of slapping them hard and putting them in a corner and so on, which is really unacceptable. So the changing value system, coupled with the numerous maladies which impact on our youth and their development, must be faced frontally, or must be addressed frontally, in order for us to be able to make controls, in order for us to be able to show them another way that they can do what has to be done without being disrespectful or disorderly, or wanting to dislike you because they think, oh, she or he is a disciplinarian. I'm tired of saying, I bet you they come and criticize us now. That kind of thing the young people will say, because if I hear them using the expletives, I call them out. And these expletives in their language is so ordinary now that even the parents don't seem to, and the guardians don't seem to be able to control it, or they don't know any better themselves. So we are developing society, and we need to face these matters frontally. So these aspects of legislation will be able to help us to achieve some of those goals. Also, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to again say or reiterate that the legislation is both timely and significant, and will be a great conduit through which this nation should pursue as it grapples with matters locally, regionally, and internationally. It is not just for Barbados, but we continue to communicate and rely on a lot of information and ideas and aspects of doing things as a developing nation, and therefore we need to do the monitoring and ensure that the best is given and shared to our youth and our children. So technology has taken over with a bang. And of course, yes, there are great benefits with the technology, but there are also tremendous challenges, especially when it comes to the rearing and supervision of our children. Mr. Speaker, I also want to indicate that parents and guardians must be more vigilant and not to be as easy as I recognize is sometimes. Many of them are of the view that when children are small, that they can walk around the house naked, that they can use the expletives, that they can make the children into punching bags, and to do all kinds of strange children, and then shut up your mouth, you're only a child. I don't want to hear your voice in here, when they are seeing the adults doing the wrong things, and when the children seek to emulate them, then they are being chastised in sometimes ways that are most unacceptable. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the proper supervision of these children is really very critical at all times and in all places and every day, rather than just be saying it when you see strangers come to the house and trying to chastise the children that you can no longer control, and then putting some slaps in them and shutting them away in the corner and shunting them away from and not giving them food and hugs and kisses that we know they need. All human beings need that kind of pampering, a hug, a kiss, a good kind word, something, a little gift, something. But as soon as the children embarrass us, when we are forever allowing them to be rude and disrespectful, and it happens in front of others, then we want to destroy them in ways that are unacceptable. So proper supervision of our children is very important and should be employed every time, every day, every hour, because the negative influences will take over our youth. And then we are saying, "Hi, we did not know. I lost my child. This person had influence on it," and so on and so forth. And it's a lot of negativity that the children are being exposed to on a continual basis. My mother and many women of her era, and she would have been 103 years were she alive in February this year. So you imagine, Mr. Speaker, how far back I go. But many of those persons, women and men, did not get any free education in the way we have. They did not go to any high school. Most of them went to third standard. But they were well disciplined, they were well taught, and they were not from family members with one child or two. Some families had 8 children, 15 children, 17 children, Mr. Speaker, way back in the times of our parents, and indeed in my time, because I'm no longer young either, and I'm a member of a family of 8. 7 girls and 1 boy. And therefore, you can imagine living in poverty and having to raise these children. But the greatest thing of all, Mr. Speaker, they were all steeped in good behavior. The neighbors looked out for the children. When our parents went into the agricultural belt or into the houses of the plantation owners to work, wherever they went, or to town selling their goods and so that they grew, there was always a neighbor or somebody who looked out or looked after the children to ensure that they got meals, that they behaved well, that they were not involved in any negative activity and so on. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that neighborliness, and our children are sometimes left alone to manage themselves. And the neighbors continue to say, when they speak to them and the children suck their teeth, come mommy and daddy, when they come, not going to do anything, the neighbors say, "We let them stay there and destroy one another." And the kind of community spirit is no longer in our societies. And those neighbors are the ones who help to raise our children. And our experiences way back in Sturgis and St. Thomas, when my mother went into the plantation, and my father being a bus driver, and we never still saw him sometimes until the weekend. The neighbors are the ones who made sure we got the food, who made sure we carried out the chores, we went to the standpipe. We did everything we had to do, and if we were rude or anything, they will chastise us. And when our parents came home, especially my mother, she will give you a second one because you must show respect for adults and others. And in school, the same obtained. It wasn't always licks for the children in school. Children were well disciplined, and we have lost so much of that in the system nowadays, where children are highly disrespectful for authority, for parents, and for parents as well, but for the janitors and for some teachers and others in the schools. We need to get to the level where our children understand that they have a responsibility and that they will not always be children, and therefore they need to conform with the rules and the regulations of any system of which they are a part, whether it be in the games section, whether it be in the school or the church or the community groups and so on. They must understand they have to conform with the rules and regulations if they are to get to become the best of the best in our society. So in those days, sir, when most of our parents went from the plantation into Bridgetown on a Saturday to sell their produce, the big sister or big brother, but mostly the big sister, the ones who had to supervise children, and they upheld the standards that parents had set, where you said, no thank you, no please, yes please. And I'm not saying you want to push your children to say yes please, although I still do it. And I'm an adult now going on farther into twilight, but it is important that we teach our children to respect everybody despite who the persons are, whether in the school, in the church, on the street, in the bus, and so on and so forth. But you know what held us together closer to, Mr. Speaker? The principles of the Bible. Our children had to sit and read a story. The big sister, the big brother would read for them. And then they had to tell things about the story as though they were teachers. All of that was embedded in us as children growing up, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reason why I believe that we must not give a blind eye or say to children who are disorderly, well, I can't tell them anything, or they will curse me or whatever. Despite whatever, Mr. Speaker, I talked to them. I said, come back. Do you know you just used abusive language? Who, me? Oh, yes, you. And you need to apologize to the adults and to others who are here, your friends, because that is unacceptable. What you just said, you could have said it in English and it would not have been so offensive. And many of them would say, well, I said, oh, you apologize because I'm not moving. And funny enough, Mr. Speaker, they don't know who I am, but they don't curse me. I said, come back. Unacceptable. That is not what God loves. And therefore, the Bible principles helped us a lot. I talked about the neighbors before and the strong community bonds where each person looked out for each other to make sure the love thy neighbor statement was the best principle of those eras to which I refer. Added to that, Mr. Speaker, to help our children along as compared with now, were clubs in the community. Was the Sunday school and the Saturday school. The games we played in the neighborhood. Hitty bitty so fast and tight. Mr. Speaker, I played that forever. And no boy ever touched me inappropriately. We play, oh yes. Oh yeah, because you boys then you would have been in a different era too. And I would have beaten the boy who would have touched me in the wrong place anyhow. Because I was the worst of my mother's children. And worst meaning, I would stand up from the biggest to the smallest, and I was never afraid. But we played hitty-bitty, we played hopscotch, we played card games, we played all kinds of games, and not a boy touched us inappropriately, nor did any girl. You cannot put your trust in anybody now for a joke in respect of that. We went to the standpipe and we shared bringing the water to for the long distances that we had to do it. And boys will walk with you but never touch you. But Mr. Speaker, I must tell you, I was a young, beautiful little red-skinned girl. Firm skin and everything else. 100 pounds was the most. Mr. Speaker, you don't need to look so hard. I'm going to get back there. And it would be from the exercise. But the point I'm making, though, is that the boys never even sought to hold your hands. You went to night service and they will walk you because there were no street lights. There was no electricity in the villages where we lived. But the boys would walk, you will talk about the old time days, you will talk about experiences. They never sought to hold our hands. You can't take that risk anymore, according to what I'm learning and what I'm witnessing. And so the village life helped us. They reared animals. You went out to bring the cow from where they're in Barrows Gully back up to Sturgis. That's a very long distance. And the boys will help you. The girls will talk with them. We had excellent times. We need to get back to that so that we can save our youth and that the adults continue to mentor our children if we are to make the difference. We also did a lot of handicraft that kept children occupied, Mr. Speaker. In the summer holidays, I don't remember how many weeks there were, if there were 7 weeks or what we had in summer, but we would go all over from Sturgis to Erie Court. And sometimes over in St. James, near to Orange Hill, to pick what we call penguin. People call it cane lily. The boys would walk with us. They will help us pick it, and so on and so forth, and sit down, and some will even learn to plait. Not a word to do with sex or not a touch. That was the generation that we had. We cannot say the same now with our young children who are exposed to others because we are not mentoring our children in the way that we should, to be able to show them how to be creative, how to be respectful of their bodies. And so we bailed behind the paling. No boy peeked at us because we had no privilege of any fencing and guard wall and anything. It was just an open little gable roof house. But the boys never peeked, because they were well trained, and the girls never peeped at the boys either. I don't know how much the girls might have been able to see all the boys, but we never did it. We were always close-knit friends, coming from church, coming from the fair, coming from wherever, and a lot of walking we had to do for many months in between cane pieces, we call them cane grounds. And so that is what we knew. But I'm not going to harp on that our parents made sure that if they did not go to worship, that the children had to go, whether it be Pentecostal or Anglican or any other religion for that matter. That is what has helped us to be able to reach the stage we are at. And Mr. Speaker, you know, probably you didn't get some, but we had to get some floggings for some things that we did not know, for any parent to pass and say, Mistress Ford, Sainty curse. Put your hand in mine. Chastisement, so you know, not getting anywhere to curse anybody. I don't even curse now, Mr. Speaker, I must tell you. I have changed a lot, but God has helped me through too. But the nurturing has brought us thus far. Now I want to go now to Mr. Speaker to my experiences in the classroom. I had 25 years in the system, a quarter of a century. So you know I'm even older than you anticipate, or perhaps than they look. But I witnessed children walking to me, and the best class for anybody who really wants to get a good understanding of teaching to teach is what we call the reception, the entry point of school. But the nursery too, but the reception and infancy. And that is the role that I played for the many years that I remained in the same school. And I witnessed what parents were doing at that time, because that's when they saw more changes, where the children will come in, the girls will be properly attired, bubbles in the hair, ribbons in the hair, earrings in the ear, and their bags were having the books, a drink, pencils or whatever. But when my boys, and that's why I love boys and men so much, Mr. Speaker, sir, when my boys came in, that are brothers and so to those girls, those boys would come, their uniforms not properly pressed, if they're pressed at all, their hair not properly combed, the socks, the shoes are in a mess, but the girls came in looking sharp. We must, and you know, Mr. Speaker, I love boys and men, and always had, because I only had one brother and all those sisters who were petty, according to what I understood. I would fly the kite, climb the tree, ride somebody's bicycle, all over the place. That was my personality. And when I see those little boys come to school, Mr. Speaker, it used to hurt my heart. And I would call back the parents, come back to me, because parents were more accommodating then. Some of them would say, what you call me back for? Mind your own business. But the parents would come back and they said, you see him? He's a precious child too. He who gave birth to him as well. Make sure he's tidy for school tomorrow morning. And with that, I would take him into the bathroom, because they didn't have the legal things like now. And tidy him up, though, and the other teachers did it too. Tidied him up and combed his hair, because I had a profound principal called Mrs. Joyce Lashley, if you would allow me to call the name, Mr. Speaker. And we had to make sure that those boys were well groomed. So by the time they came upstairs for prayers with the rest of the school, my boy looking good. I'd iron in the school. Sometimes I had to use Vaseline or castor oil to put on their feet. They were so scruffy, they were not showered properly. Some of them, not all. And I'm saying it is that kind of nurturing spirit. The janitor helped out. The schoolmate server helped out. The teachers helped out those children to make sure that they became good citizens. And today we are very proud of where they have come from poverty, and others helping parents and guiding them to be able to make the difference. And so we must have our schools doing that again. I'm not telling teachers to do menial tasks, but if they want for their legacy in the teaching system to be recognized by those same children, no, you're not doing it for anybody to say you do good and put anything, add anything to your name. You're doing it out of the love of your heart and the genuineness that comes with it. And so we had the PTA, and PTAs were strong. When we say, I know some schools that don't have a PTA functioning, Mr. Speaker, sir. PTAs are powerful, and they can make a difference with the education of parents to help them to be able to see how they can continue to nurture their children well. School staff members can make a difference as well. It's no point in coming to school. You want to be a teacher, and then you look at the children and say, go, sir, you were there last night. I can smell you this morning. I can smell you. You cannot treat people's children like that. But sad to say, that seems to be happening in some instances, which I will want to condemn, as I'm sure all of the honourable members in here and other people in Barbados will want to condemn, because the children just need the care, the love, the attention. Faith-based groups were integral, Mr. Speaker, and they played that significant role in helping us to protect and to nurture our children. I took the opportunity when I would have been working in the Ministry of Education as Parliamentary Secretary and then Minister of State, to go on a Thursday morning to the Magistrates Court at St. Matthias. And I did it because the school attendance officers would do their patrols every morning to make sure that the children who were loitering in the bus stands and on the streets anytime after 9 o'clock, they were accompanied by a police officer, and they will take the children to the schools. And I found that when I did the school board minutes, there were some children that were absent for 3 and 4 consecutive weeks, and absolutely nothing to be able to show, or any record to show the reason why they were not at school. We did not know if the house got burnt and they didn't have school clothes. We did not know if the child had gone to Timbuktu or wherever, but that the school boards gave us, minutes gave us the information. And when I went there, Mr. Speaker, I saw some of all kinds of strange things I just could not understand. I remember vividly a little boy who went up to the government industrial school because his mother and he never got along. And therefore he went and she had a beautiful plant pot and he urinated in the pot. And the mother took him to the, what do you call the officer? The probation officer. And that little boy ended up going up to the government industrial school. And that thing hurt me, Mr. Speaker, to the core. There were other children who had done a lot of other things that were worse, and they too went up to the government industrial school. And I think it is because we are not training our parents, both females and males, as to what they expect from children. They were children too, and they will throw a stone to hit a bird and lick out somebody's glass window too. And so we must remember, as children, we did strange things, or we did good things, but they came to the wrong ending, and therefore not be so rigid. Now, when you take up a little boy at that age and send him up to the government industrial school to spend time because he urinated in a flower pot that the mother had a beautiful flower, it did not make sense to me. And then we had this sad situation with teenage pregnancies. And I had the privilege of going to the Edna Nichols Center. I'm not so sure where it is at now. I don't get caught up in the ministries, business, and ministries, meaning ministries overall. And therefore, the Edna Nichols Center was exclusively established for students who would be delinquent, they were staying away from school, or they were on suspension. And if you're on suspension for doing something wrong, you send them home for a week or 2 weeks. What are you doing? You're sending them back into the community where they can get into more trouble. So the Edna Nichols Center served that purpose. The bus will come to the ministry, pick them up, and take them down to St. Peter, and they will be looked after. Mrs. Chastanet, I think her name became Miss Hewitt. She was the person who headed up the institution. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? Every Easter, that leader will call and say, Miss, you have a way with children. The teaching is still in you. I want you to come to talk to my teenage mothers. And Mr. Speaker, I am not a crier. I did not even cry when I saw my mother pass away, and my sister. But when I saw that little girl, 11 years old, pregnant, Mr. Speaker, it almost took my heart away. And then she went, who, Pakalaka, who is he? He's driving a minibus. I said, Pakalaka, what is this? And she did not know an 11-year-old child, Mr. Speaker, I had not even written the common entrance exam. And you know why? The mother was imprisoned. And she was looking after 4 other little siblings. And some man took advantage of her. And therefore, that program was carried on for more than 10 years, where the project was raising a child on a small budget. And every year, I made it my business to go and be a part of it. And the majority of those children who were teenage pregnant mothers, I can take off that 11-year-old, most of them would be 14 down to 16 plus. And therefore, adult males, most of the time, not schoolboys or anything, were the ones who were the perpetrators. We need to do more of that. I'm not so sure what is happening now because I left education many years ago in the capacity I was with the Honourable Prime Minister then when she was the Minister for Education and Youth Affairs and Sports. But I'm not sure what is happening now. But I know that there's still a lot of young pregnant girls under the age of 16, and they're not pregnant for schoolboys in the same way. They're hardback men who are taking advantage of those girls because mothers are not fulfilling their roles, some of them, in the way they should, to supervise. If my mother could supervise 7 girl children in poverty and work every day, and my father go to work at 3 in the morning and come back at the next morning, then why are we not supervising our children? And because of that, we're having so many challenges in the schools, in the villages and the homes, and our youth are suffering by the minute, Mr. Speaker. And this legislation should be able to help us to be able to have schools make sure that they have programs in place, to be able to get the churches to continue to be on board, to have the community groups, to have the scouts, the brownies, the guides, the cadets, and so on. Because when we say, do you want to go and join the cadets? Some parents are asking, and children say, not me, that's too rigid. I want to play by PlayStation. I want to go on my computer. And the children calling the scores. It is wrong. No child in my house, Mr. Speaker, I don't care how old I get to be, will call the shots in at me. I am the boss in here. And I will say whether you will wear long pants or short pants. I will say whether you will go to the fair or not. Otherwise, you have parents, go with them. And the young people in my house know me well. I raised 3 grandchildren. And when I'm ready, I call the shots. And if you're rude and disrespectful, I'm going to deal with you. I don't have to slap you. I don't have to. You will go where your parents are. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say we can make a difference. We can make a difference in this society. And we can afford to be able to look after our children. Some of them are so disorderly, so disrespectful. The expletives, they're vulnerable as well, Mr. Speaker. Many of them have mental challenges because something called, I'm finished, sir?
2 more minutes, Honourable.
I wrap it, sir. Yeah. Something called drugs, marijuana, or mollies, or whatever it is, because I don't know the things. I hear about them. They are taking a toll in our young people, especially our boys, who should be treasured because they are the men and the leaders of tomorrow, as so are the women. I want to then close, Mr. Speaker, by indicating that our children require the necessary care, guidance, protection, love, supervision, attention, moral support, and everything else that goes with it. The educational system cannot do it alone. It is important that neighbors do it. And the way that we are now living, where people are in the heights and the terraces, and the people put up guard walls, and so they forget the little neighbors that are there that just need to be talked to. They see them wandering away and doing strange things, come back. Do you think that your parents would like to know that you're involved in that? We need to nurture children. I do it all in town. Nobody knows me and they don't curse me because I talk to them as an adult would to be able to bring them forth. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the people of Barbados to work with us as the government as they have been doing before. Because at the end of the day, the children of today are the men and women, the workers, the role models, and everything else of tomorrow. And unless we make sure we get back to the Bible, get back to the Christian aspect of things, get back to serving in our communities, do a community cleanup, call some of the same children and engage them so that they know that community service is important. Help some with the uniforms, help some with the textbooks, help some with lunch money. Sometimes the parents don't have it, but we can make a difference, not only as politicians. I'm not talking about giving, like some people think that politicians must also always do, but I'm saying as the neighbors, as the ones in the churches and the other faith-based groups, and so we can make a difference in it. And so, as I close, I say congratulations to all those who assisted in this exercise, and may we be able to continue to work together as groups, community groups, ministries, police service, all of the entities come together as one, hold our various sessions and so, and at least adopt a child, not to bring it in your house forever, but to let the child know, I love you. You make a difference. And I want to be able to work with you because I don't want you, according to what the old people say, to get in the police hand. I want you to be progressive. I know you have skills and talents, and we want to be able to push you through to be able to achieve those goals that you will deliver. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank you sincerely, and I trust that I will live to see these aspects of these 2 pieces of legislation working in our society to make that tremendous difference that I anticipate they will. And again, I highly commend all those who are engaged in the exercise to be able to make that tremendous difference in the growth and development of Barbados. I thank you, sir. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of this bill before this lower house today, the Child Protection Bill, and wish to commend it not only to this house but to the people of Barbados. It is one of the social transformational bills, pieces of legislation, that this particular administration continues to pass in this Parliament. It will replace some acts of ultimate vintage, one of which was enacted in a Parliament of Barbados when no Barbadian alive today was born in 1904, the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act. And that act, if one were to look at it, had 15 sections, a schedule. It focused to some extent on punishment of children, the fines for breach of the act, $24. As you understand, it was $24 in those days was a lot of money. Absolutely anachronistic, passed in Victorian times as some pieces of legislation still, two which will be repealed here very shortly when the Child Justice Act, the brother or sister to this particular bill, or Child Justice Bill rather, the brother or sister to this particular bill comes before this Parliament. And, this bill seeks to advance the care and protection of one of what I regard as the four most vulnerable groups in our society, children. The others, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course, would be the elderly, persons with disabilities, and in my submission, single mothers with more children perhaps than they could cater for financially and emotionally. Nelson Mandela, who I regard as one of the three greatest individuals of the last century, said that history will judge us by the difference we make in the everyday lives of children. That is the context within which this bill, which we have debated today, is brought for the benefit of our constituents. The Act's purpose, and Madam Deputy Speaker, you would excuse me for repeating some of what some of the previous speakers have said, but there is wisdom in repetition. We're getting repetition from the other side of inaccuracies and falsehoods. So what we're doing here today is repeating the truth, sir, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is in the Act. And the Act's purpose is to protect children from abuse, neglect, to provide for children in need of care and protection, and to promote the welfare of a child. The ultimate objective of this legislation is to have the best interest of the child being given paramount consideration in all matters. And in that, it duplicates and exemplifies other pieces of legislation that previous Barbados Labour Party administrations have passed. For example, the Family Law Act in the early 1980s, which speaks throughout that piece of legislation as having its provisions in the best interest of the child, and the interest of the child being of paramount importance. The safety and welfare of the child, in all cases, shall be given paramount consideration, and in all actions and decisions in relation to the child. Much has been said, Madam, and it is great, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this bill is being brought within the context of Child Month, month of May, in which a lot happens, Madam Deputy Speaker, and in fact I believe that tomorrow is the International Day for the Child. people have exercised their democratic right. And I always say, I will defend people's right to criticize, to oppose, to march up and down the place, to go on brass tacks. But as I said, I also have to be given the right, especially as a parliamentarian within this parliament, to counter what the critics are saying. And I said, and I hold to it, that the critics of this bill, in principle, were talking political foolishness. That is the truth. And I was criticized by someone who I believe is the third vice president of the Democratic Labour Party, and told that I should apologize for saying what I strongly believe is the truth. I defend the right of the other side to criticize, but I also have the right to say that they're talking political foolishness. And that is the engagement, because what they are saying, everything now, every bill being focused, like if you're putting up a straw man to lick it down on gender orientation and sexual identity and all kind of nonsense that is not in the bill, when anybody with some intelligence, far less someone who says that they're a university lecturer, and people who say that, and people who are attorneys at law, on reading this bill, straightforward, simple language, written that anybody could understand, could see that this bill doesn't speak towards any sexual orientation or gender neutrality or identity, or as I said at a political branch meeting, that tomorrow now, somebody gonna go in one of the schools run by the government of Barbados, a boy, and put on a dress, and that gonna be acceptable, and we approve of that. Nothing so in this bill, but almost every Saturday now, some march or the other, and they have the constitutional right to march, on that this government promoting these foreign concepts out of Europe or America. I want to bring them here. Nothing so. Why? I had to read the bill again today just to confirm for about the 50th time that nothing is like that. But everything, the Samoa Agreement, which we signed on the 15th of December, our ambassador to Brussels gonna force same-sex marriage in Barbados, similar to this bill. And we undermining the family and parental rights by bringing this bill. And people who I would swear blind have not read the bill. And I have a program on radio, I think twice a week, by some of these, the usual suspects, I want to call them, including an individual who was a member of the other place up to when the last election was called. And thankfully, he's no longer a member, criticizing about the establishment of joint select committees, of which the report is before this parliament, of one such committee, that these committees were formed unconstitutionally and breach of the law. I suspect that he too, don't mind he was a parliamentarian, did not read the rules that establish these joint standing committees. If not, he too would not be talking such foolishness. And he ought to know better. Tell the truth. So I am quite embarrassed that I even have to address this here today. And a bill? There's no bill that is perfect. But it is closer to perfection now that it has gone through a joint select committee of parliament, which had 9 sittings, and everybody, the whole of Barbados, invited to come and give written submissions, and oral too. I'm a bit surprised. They I believe only had about 13 or 15 written submissions. People were given the opportunity to come before the committee and engage the committee and have a dialogue, which is what we did in the Policy and Governance Committee with the Cybercrime Bill now before it. But this bill is as good as you can get in the circumstances. There is no undermining of children's rights. The removal of a child from his parents would only become necessary, would only occur when it is necessary to protect that child from the risk of serious harm or danger. And that is where the state must reserve the right to intervene, where a child is at serious harm or danger. And other than that, the state, of course, provides free education for each and every child in this country who wishes it. I mean, it's optional for the parent to send the child to private school. I know I went to government primary school and my 2 children went there too. And I would always advocate the government schools. But if a parent wants to send their child to private school, that is their parental right. And the state provides free health care for children and has to protect the child, and that's ultimately not only the child but all its citizens, and that's ultimately the goal of a government. Other than that, it's up to the parent. But where obviously the welfare of the child and the safety of the child is at risk, the state then has to intervene, and that is what this bill seeks to do. Where Section 31, the director has reasonable grounds to believe that the health and safety of the child is in immediate and imminent jeopardy, the director may, if necessary with the police, take the child into custody. But even when the director does that, within 24 hours, must go to court and apply to court for what I will call a Section 32 order under the bill. And those Section 32 orders are wide, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South indicated this morning. Very wide, 13 such orders that can be applied for depending on the circumstances. And with applying, the director is under a statutory duty, or will be under a statutory duty, to inform the parents of it so that the parents can appear and obviously be heard in contravention or rather in opposition to any application for any such order. So this is a nobly reasonable act that also gives the child the entitlement to legal representation, which has to be done. The Child Justice Bill does that as well. And we in the proposed Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act also proposes that legal representation should be given to a person with disability who can't afford it. And in this bill, the child also has the right to a fair hearing and the right to be heard. All of these are safety devices for the protection of the child, which is of paramount importance, and there's no undermining within the scope of things on parental rights, and no attempt whatsoever to bring in any international norms or practices that are foreign to this country. So sometimes I wonder about, as I said, the usual suspects, because it's the same people that opposing everything that this government is bringing. And whether, as I said, I don't believe that they do enough reading, or if they do, they don't understand what they read. And the Convention on the Rights of Children, something that Barbados has signed on to for 34 years, and Barbados under a Democratic Labour Party government, as was said by the Honourable Member for St. Peter. And nothing in that convention either speaks to these sexual orientation and transgender issues, and whether a boy should be able to go in a girl's bathroom at school, and all of these, like if, you know, you want to undermine the stability of a society. And Like I said, I understand opposition politics. Deputy Speaker, you know I understand it because you and I sat down when I first entered Parliament in a 5-year, 3-month period, a Parliament that went on beyond a 5-year period. Between 2013, February 2013 and May 2018, you and I sat down together on this side of Parliament, ma'am, and we understand opposition politics. But I think that as Barbadians, citizens, who I still want to believe want the best for our country, we have a duty, all of us, including opposition, not to spread propaganda for propaganda's sake, and to believe that because you repeat the propaganda, it somehow gathers veracity. It doesn't. And it is time that this stop, and that it is undermining, in my opinion, and taking advantage of Barbadians who they believe do not know better. I wish, Madam Speaker, to spend a few minutes on the genesis of how we're here, and I thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch. He's to giving me credit for some of this bill. I want to as well claim part ownership of it, because I remember, I think it was in April 2019, we had a meeting at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Centre. Had about 10 ministers there, of course, chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister, a lot of government officials. It was at that time that there had been an increase in bullying in schools. Children getting into fights, and I think knife pulling out in some cases and all of that. And we spent about 12 hours that day, all up in 8 o'clock. We were still at Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Centre, having started at 9, to try to grapple with how you would deal with children who are giving trouble in schools, and you don't want to send a 12-year-old to Dodds or to Somerville, and what alternatives you could have, and whether we should form, a facility center, temporarily remove that child from school, and they go to this center, they're counseled, and they have experts there, psychologists, etc., to try to bring them back. Because as Frederick Douglass said, it is better to try and raise a child properly than to mend a broken man. And this is the result of all of that. A committee was formed, of which I, as then Home Affairs Minister, was chairman of, bringing together the social aspects of it, the care and protection aspects, and the child justice aspects, and how you would divert children as well within the paths away from the Dodds and Somerville, the confinements, under the criminal justice systems. So, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch, he said, we had a case where we got an expert in child protection, someone who had assisted drafting the Grenada legislation, a Barbadian, to deal with the Child Protection Act under the funding of the United Nations, one of the United Nations agencies. And this act lagged a bit behind, and of course, we couldn't bring in any other act, the Justice Act, before. So the Protection Act has come before this Parliament. We're behind, as has been noted today, because many CARICOM countries have similar updated child protection legislation. Grenada has, Antigua has, St. Lucia, I believe St. Kitts, and some of those countries as well have combined their Child Protection Act with Adoption Acts. We have chosen to leave it by itself. I suppose the Adoption Act will be looked at a later date, but the reality is that the acts related to child protection, as I said, go back 120 years and are in serious need of reform. And that's what we're doing today. This act establishes a child protection authority, and the ministry, parent ministry, of course, is at present looking to see how it could amalgamate institutions under the ministry. So however this child protection authority comes to be established, the principles and the statutory principles would still be there. And I must say, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I believe the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said earlier when he led the debate, that the Director of the Child Care Board is doing a very good job. I'm impressed with her. I would not have expected otherwise, that's the truth, based on her background and her experience and her training. She's a constituent of mine. And I'm happy to see that the government, through the Ministry of Crime Prevention, has got off the ground now its community parenting program, of which the Honourable Prime Minister first spoke in her budgetary speech last year, that this concept and initiative would have been developed, and is finally being developed, I believe in association too with the Ministry of Youth and Community Development. They had a launch 2 Saturdays ago, and I'm happy to see that has been finally established, so that children and parents, because parents' education is paramount. I often say that you can't really read how to be a good parent or the best parent you can be in a textbook. That is the truth. I have 2 children, both well adults now, and being a parent has been one of the more difficult challenges I've had in life. The truth, a lot is easier. And now, of course, I have a grandchild, 4-year-old, so I regard myself as an expert on parenting. But there are some people who need as much help as possible in terms of parent education. I'm happy that my foundation, the directors, found it fit on my advice to hold a parent education and personal development program, ran for 11 weeks from the end of January to last month, and was highly successful. And every Saturday morning, parents, predominantly female, I must say, would have hoped to have had some more men come in. And looking forward to it every Saturday morning. And Parados involved family planning, a lot of experts, and combining it with financial literacy, national transformation initiative, Ministry of Labour, and other ministries as well, and other experts, National Council for Substance Abuse, the Trust Fund, entrepreneurs. All of this has an impact on what we're talking about today, child care and protection, because it impacts on parents and parents' education. And that's what we're looking at as well. In terms of the opposition, as I said, Ma'am, I, like you, understand opposition politics. But what I don't understand and could never agree to is hypocrisy in politics, hypocrisy in public life. And I might excuse some of those who control one wing or the other of the Democratic Labour Party at the present time. Because some of them are new to politics, some green, never went in Parliament yet, that is the truth. And of course, they aren't being mentored properly, because who gonna mentor them in a state of confusion that is the Democratic Labour Party right now, a lobby group? But, so I excuse them. But the older folk in the Democratic Labour Party well know the last cabinet of the Democratic Labour Party, the last decade, was a lot more than a lot of people know. And I have to say this. When I was Minister of Home Affairs, I saw some files in the Immigration Department whereby people, CARICOM citizens, were deported from this country. CARICOM mothers were deported from this country by ministers of immigration, including the then Prime Minister, who for a while occupied the position of Minister of Immigration, were deported from Barbados, knowing well that they had Barbadian-born children. And those children put in homes like Sterling's children's homes. And you talking about a party that cares, and they're talking about care and protection of children, and we got to protect our children, and deported mothers of Barbadian-born children from this country back to Jamaica, back to Guyana, putting those children in Sterling children's homes. I could not believe it. Could not believe it. I cried when I looked. I remember specifically 2 files, and said, how could a Minister of Immigration do this? How could someone do this to people of their own color? How could people born within a certain socio-economic group do that to people? That is what happened. They have no moral authority to talk about children. When you do that, none whatsoever. On the files, one thing about system of government. Government is a continuum. And the files are there. And that is what is the legacy of the Democratic Labour Party government. Just because somebody overstayed a time in Barbados, and they're here long because they got 2 children born to Barbadian men in Barbados. And as far as I'm concerned, by that time they're entitled under the Constitution to citizenship of Barbados, and that is what we've been doing. I started it, the Honourable Member for Christchurch, he's continuing it, giving CARICOMs born citizens citizenship of this country where they've been living here over 7 years, because that is what the Constitution says, over 10. But yet they were deported, and the children going in children's homes. And you come and they're marching up and down the street talking about children. No. I hate and will not stand for hypocrisy in public life, because I believe in public life you've got to be truthful and have integrity and deal with people as human beings, as you would wish them to deal with you. So this is where we are, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have the disabilities policy speaking towards children with disabilities on each and every aspect of their lives, dealing with their education, their health, their access to public spaces. In other words, creating a platform where children with disabilities can realize their full potential, just like how every other citizen, every other child in Barbados is entitled to have the opportunity to realize the full potential as Barbadian citizens. And of course, we would have heard from the Honourable Member for St. Michael South about the Rights of Persons with Disabilities bill also coming before this House within the foreseeable future. The select committee process, I commend it. I commend it as an extremely wise decision to give ordinary citizens of Barbados the opportunity to take part in our democracy and to play a role in the legislative process of this country. We just finished, as I said, hearings on the cybercrime bill. There have been over 40 written submissions. We heard 12 people. And even on that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say, because, you know, this propaganda going out that we allowed the chairman of the Law Reform Commission, who had a role, of course, in the crafting of that cybercrime bill, 2.5 hours to speak, and then others only had 10 minutes. Absolutely not true. Because one of the main critics of the bill, who 5 years ago was supporting the process, saying that we got to get a cybercrime bill, we out of date, but he criticizing it now. But we had him on for 50 minutes, because it is, you can't only look at it as your 10-minute presentation, and 10 minutes is a long time, but engaging him. And that's what you want, as the Honourable Member for St. George North spoken, the opportunity to engage. Yesterday, we had one of the critics of some aspects of the bill. He was on for a whole 75 minutes. So when you look at the situation, those who are critical of some aspects of the bill, and there's only probably about 3 clauses that coming up all the time for criticism, had equal time before the committee as the chairman of the Law Reform Commission and the Honourable Minister yesterday and the consultant to the commission. But yet I hearing and seeing on social media and hearing on brass stats, people only had 10 minutes. I mean, this kind of, you know, like if now you're repeating lies and that's going to get you support and votes before you go and clean up the institution of, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter said, the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, that is now not even a lobby group, that they want to kill each other out there and expel everybody.
Honourable Member, you have 2 minutes, please.
Yes, ma'am. So this bill is a fantastic social transformational bill. The employment of alternative dispute resolution procedures at Section 29 is also something to be commended, because everything can be going in court. And there's a duty on the director to consider such before you go into court for some of these Section 32 orders. So it is part of this party's commitment to protect the most vulnerable. This bill is a fundamental part of such. You know, it's a situation where the government, we're creating institutions and mechanisms to help parents, if necessary, in terms of the raising of their children, but where the best interest of the child has to be paramount. And there's absolutely not interfere by any member of the Barbados public about this bill. I'm obliged to you, Madam Deputy.
Honourable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in support of this bill before the House, the child, in particular the Child Protection Bill, and to congratulate the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, my good friend, for bringing what, once again, by this administration can be only described as a transformational piece of legislation. Transformational not only in the impact that it will have going forward, but even looking at the pieces of legislation it is now seeking to enhance, replace in some cases, in most cases, legislation that dates back 120 years. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a parliament that is doing serious work to transform this Barbadian society in the present, moving full steam ahead into the Barbados of the future. So I congratulate the Honourable Member and Minister from St. Michael South and those who also preceded him before his appointment to this post, those who would have, from whom he, as he would have said in his own words, from whom he would have taken the baton. Madam Deputy Speaker, at the outset, let me wish all Barbadians Happy Child Month. It's really at the core and center of what we're discussing today. And as I reflect on the fact that we are in this month of May, in the month of Child Month, as we celebrate it and acknowledge it here in Barbados, it caused me to reflect on children. And it brought me right back to a song that I remember hearing and seeing the music video on Channel 8 many years ago by one of the greatest female vocalists that the world has ever seen, Whitney Houston. And she would have sang a song, and I remember as a little child in my house watching this music video, I believe the children are our future. I could sing it if I had a little liquid courage, but since I have not had any of that, I will spare the house the torture. But it reminds me of that, and it puts me into a frame of mind where I have to acknowledge that children really are the hope of all countries. All societies, all civilizations, your youth represent your future. They represent who you would want your country to be going forward. And therefore, it is prudent, it is important, it is almost critical that those of us who are adults, and especially those who are leaders within a society, do all that is within our power to safeguard, to protect, to invest in our youth and our children, because they really are our future. And if we don't teach them well and let them lead the way, show them all the beauty they possess inside, we may find ourselves as a society that spirals out of control and descends into chaos. So that is really the context within what we are debating today. We're not just debating a piece of legislation, we're really debating our future. We're debating ensuring that we invest in and that we secure and protect those vulnerable persons. And as the Honourable Member who spoke before me, who last spoke, as he listed his 4 vulnerable groups within the society, children in many cases will top that vulnerable list, that priority list of persons that need to be well taken care of. Madam Deputy Speaker, reflecting on this, I, as a Member of Parliament, have made it one of my joys, one of my privileges, one of my most exciting aspects of this responsibility that I bear with honor. And in St. Michael North, I have 2 primary schools, I have 2 day nurseries, and I have 1 nursery school. And I interact with all of them. And I have made it actually one of the things that I do on a regular basis, especially when it comes to the primary schools, to go and to interact with all of these little ones. So from 5 years old to 11 years old, it doesn't matter the age, but within that grouping, I'm at the primary schools, I'm interacting with them. And just recently, obviously, one of the bigger milestones of the primary school calendar and life would be the common entrance exam, the 11 plus. And about 2 weeks ago, I would have gone to both of my primary schools, and I would have, as I usually do every year, I would have gone to give a pep talk to the class 4s of those two institutions, the Lodge Primary School and the Grisettes Primary School. And as I was preparing my thoughts as to what I was going to share with those young future Barbadians and future leaders of Barbados, I thought to myself, I must tell them that they must win. And as I thought about win, W-I-N, there are three things that came to me, and I shared these thoughts with them on that morning. One, I encouraged them to watch their thoughts. Recognizing that we're in a world where there could be so much negativity that abounds, and there could be so much anxiety even as they prepare themselves to face this exam, I told them watch their thoughts. I told them to ensure that they kept their minds in a positive space. So watch your thoughts. That's the first way that you're going to win. Watch your thoughts. The second one was invest in yourself. That's the I in win. Invest in yourself. And invest in yourself, I told them, you know what? At the end of the day, you get out what you put in. So it was important for me to, even as they were preparing for that exam, to tell them that you can get out what you put in. And then lastly, I told them, in the end, never give up. And with that, I told them perseverance seldom fails. And I want to use all of that to say that I saw that as my way of investing, and I always do say as my way of investing in not only that small group of young people for which I have some level of influence and some level of responsibility for, but I want to share that even with the people of Barbados as well, as we reflect on the importance of this piece of legislation. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth of the matter is that in fact, I don't even think it would be hyperbole for me to say the vast majority of children in our country will never come into contact with this legislation. The vast majority of them will never come into contact with the articles, with the provisions, the sections of this bill, soon to be enacted. Simply because this bill has been designed to take care of to protect and to provide care for those who are most vulnerable, those who are being harmed, those who are in a place where they need to be protected by the state. But to be honest with you, even though it is the vast majority of our children will not come into contact with this legislation, I dare say to you that if it was even one child in this society that needed to be protected by legislation, this Barbados Labour Party administration would still put this legislation on the books today. Even if it was one single child. So it's not the numbers of children, but I'm happy that we live in a society where we can, even with the numbers not being at levels that we would want them to be, which is 0, we are still in a place where the vast majority of our children will never come into contact with the provisions of this legislation. But it is still absolutely important, because even if it is one that needs to be protected, we as a responsible government need to ensure that legislation is robust, is relevant, is modern, and it is doing what it needs to do to ensure that our children are well protected. As I reflected on what I was shared today, I'm reminded of the words of Mahatma Gandhi. One, I heard my honourable friend from St. James North, and he mentioned, I think it was, who did you quote? Nelson Mandela. Oh yes, Nelson Mandela. And he said he was one of the greatest people of our century, and I believe I can agree with that. Another one is Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi said, a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. Mahatma Gandhi, he said, a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members. Not by GDP, not by any macroeconomic statistic or criterion. He said, you measure the greatness of a nation by how it takes care of its weakest members. And therefore, legislation like what we are debating today is absolutely critical in ensuring that we are safeguarding and protecting the most vulnerable and weakest members in our society, those who need us most. Legislation like this steps into the gap for those who are voiceless. In many cases, those who cannot speak for themselves, who cannot, in many cases, voice up their discomfort, voice up the abuse that they're facing, that they're suffering. Legislation now steps in to protect those persons in those instances where they cannot protect themselves. Little children, you heard story after story today, Madam Deputy Speaker, of instances where members of Parliament have interacted and come face to face with children who were abused, clearly being abused and misused, mistreated. Many of us come into contact with it, unfortunately. But this legislation allows us today to be able to right some wrongs and to give us the level of control that we need within this society, this civilization that we have, to make sure that even when they are individual children who are powerless to their abusers, that we now as a state have legislation that supports protecting them and making sure that they can live to the fullness of their potential. I reflect on the objects and reasons of the legislation, and that's where it really starts. The very first, an opening, if you want to say, the opening ball of this legislation. And it says this act makes provision for children. Not just any child, but children who are in need of care and protection. So why wouldn't I, as a responsible and right-thinking person, not support this legislation? Who could not support this legislation? Or we can go through and look at section by section, clause by clause. We can find a word that's out of place or a punctuation mark that's out of place. But it's really not about the letter of the law, but it's more about the spirit, the intent. What is it that we're trying to achieve here? And that is to give robust protection to children who are in need of care and protection. That's what this is all about. We're not in here just for fun. We're not spending this entire day debating this just because this is a frolic for us. This is not theatrics. This is not a dramatization. This is real life, real people, real children who are facing real danger and who are in need of real protection from the state. So that is why we're here today. And that's what this legislation is about. That's what the intent said. That's what the object said. It's to protect children and to provide for their care. As I said, and I think the honourable member, the one who led this debate, the minister, would have mentioned these various pieces of legislation, Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act, that dates back to 1904, 120 years ago. And also you can see that in 1969, administrations would have established the Child Care Board through the Child Care Act. So you can see over the many decades that child welfare, child care has been something that has been important to leaders of this country. So when I go to the bill itself, I looked at clause number 5, and it speaks to children in need of protection and care. Who are they? It said a child is in need of care and protection where the child, A, does not have a parent. B, does not have a parent who is fit to exercise care or guardianship owing to, and it lists a number of reasons why. Mental illness, bodily disease, etc., infirmity, incapacity, etc. C, has suffered harm caused by neglect, a failure of a parent to supervise the child or adequately supervise or protect the child, a victim of abuse, etc., etc. So it lists out there all of the qualifications, the qualifiers for who are these children who will be in need of care and protection under this legislation. As I said, the vast majority of the children in Barbados are in homes where they are taken care of. They're homes where it may not be perfect because, most of us grew up in circumstances where we would have wished it would have been 10 times better. I wish I had a swimming pool when I was growing up, but I didn't have any. I didn't have any. You always wish that things could be a little bit better. But I had love. I had care. I had food. I had shelter. I had clothing. So these circumstances across the board in Barbados, the vast majority of cases, they will not qualify for neglect, failure of a parent to supervise the child, etc., etc. Most households in Barbados cover those aspects. But there's some aspects of this bill as I move along that really please me. One being the mandatory reporting. Before this legislation, this modern legislation, there wasn't a requirement that healthcare providers, medical practitioners, principals of schools, police officers, etc., that they had a duty, and even though it was maybe an unspoken rule, that you had a duty of care to these children that you serve, these children that you come into contact with, even though you had that unspoken duty of care, we are now saying that there have been too many instances where, as the honourable members and other members have spoken, there were too many people who would wizzy. Oh, you know, that was going on for years. Oh, he was doing that to she for a long time. And many family members who would hide up and silence and would talk to each other in hushed tones around the Christmas tree. And talk about what happened to cousin Susie and brother Joe. In hushed tones. And we're encouraging all Barbadians to see as their duty of care that when they see things like this happening, when they hear of things like this happening, just report it. Again, if you're doing it with good intentions, if you're doing it in good faith, then you don't suffer the risk of being prosecuted unfairly. But we're saying to those people who have direct interaction with these children, we're now under this legislation saying, you must report. You have not only a duty of care, but you now have a mandatory reporting legislation, a section of this legislation that will say you don't just have responsibility in terms of a philosophical perspective, but you now have to take action and report it to the relevant authorities. I also was excited to see that there's going to be establishment of an authority, and that's in clause 8. And this will be the Child Protection Authority. And once again, we're not just saying we're going to give you a bill, we're going to give you an act, but we're also going to give an authority, create an entity that will have the sole responsibility of taking care and looking after the welfare of our children on a daily basis. An authority where instances, when reported, they can be investigated and that actions can be taken. So we're adding teeth to the legislation by creating this authority. Another thing that I thought was very exciting about this piece of legislation is in clause 38, where it talks about care plans. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are many people out there who are holding the view and trying to perpetuate the view, that this administration is now bringing legislation that would allow the authorities to walk into people's homes and take out their children. A malicious, reckless, worthless thought. I can say worthless?
Worthless.
Worthless. Okay, let me say worthless then. Let me refine it and say worthless. Outside it will say worthless. All right? So it's a reckless thought that we're going to just come into people's homes, we just see a good, happy family, well-adjusted family, doing the right things, parents doing the right things, and the government is just going to reach in their hands and take out children. Why would we do that? Doesn't even make sense. But they're out there perpetuating that lie. But this legislation says that before an order can even be given for the removal of a child from a home, that the authority, the director, has to provide and produce a care plan. A plan of care for that child. You have to outline the steps. How are we going to take care of that child going forward? How much interaction will the parent have with the child? The residential considerations, where is the child going to be housed? All of this is going to go into the care plan that must be developed for those individual children. I think that's a powerful part of this legislation, because it goes to show that this is not some fly-by-night decision, Madam Deputy Speaker. That means the director has to put in legwork, has to go and investigate the situation, has to come up with a documented plan of action as to how we are going to make sure this child now is going to have improved care going forward. You can't just pick up a child and go and send them someplace else. It doesn't work that way. We are a civilization at the end of the day. So I'm very pleased, section by section, soon to be clause by clause, or clause by clause, soon to be section by section of this legislation, speaks to the welfare of our children And I believe very strongly, I support this wholeheartedly, because this legislation, I think, is not only modern, but it is really stabbing at the heart of some of the deep, dark, and sometimes nasty issues that we confront as a society as it relates to our children and their welfare in this country. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have responsibility in the Ministry of Health and Wellness for a number of departments, too many to count, a lot of them. And I'm so pleased and honored to be a part of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. It has given me an opportunity to really interact with Barbadians at a different level, in a different way. I will let you know, in many different ways. And I remember just last week, and I take it very seriously, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I take all things in my life seriously. And I remember hearing the Honourable Leader of the Opposition last week in the debate on income tax reform, some of the income tax reform measures, and he took a swiping approach to some things, and he mentioned the QEH, etc. As usual. And his words at that time, Madam Speaker, they resonated with me for the last 7 days. And he said, I will not allow this opportunity on my feet to pass without correcting the record and dealing with him and that. With the Honourable Member and that, sorry. He said that the QH is in chaos. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a reckless and inflammatory statement. It is almost as reckless as when he said that the government has lost control of the police. These reckless, crazy statements that are being just mouthed out in public settings. Just to create political footballs, but at the same time creating unease and trying to unsettle an otherwise completely stable society. I have no problem with persons opposing. In fact, I encourage it. I believe that there should be dissenting voices at times. It gives you different perspectives. Nothing wrong with that at all. I encourage it. But I do believe that there needs to be a responsibility, a level of responsibility that all of us in here bear and should carry and should rise to. So we don't descend into recklessness and reckless speech and idle speech that then could create chaos within our country. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's another reason why I have to defend the people of the QEH, because there are thousands of people who go to work at the QEH every single day and do a phenomenal job in providing health care to the citizens of Barbados. Spend hours on the job, serving, taking care of, looking after the people of our country. Thousands of people go through the doors, in and out through the doors of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the polyclinics, etc. of this country on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, receiving excellent health care. Do we get it right in 100% of the cases? No. There are some instances where we do not get it exactly right. There's no profession on earth where you can get it right 100% of the time. And in those instances, the team at the QH and across the healthcare network do their utmost best to correct, address, remedy the situation wherever there's a deficiency that has been identified. But there's no chaos. There's no chaos at the QEH. There's no chaos in the healthcare system in this country. Not with thousands of people getting through.
I remember, just make sure you tidy it in with the...
Of course. Thank you, Madam Deputy
You have
Speaker.
just a few minutes.
And asking relative to our funding of how the taxpayers' dollars are collected, where this money is going. Over $300 million per year is allocated to the Ministry of Health and Wellness, especially in this financial year that we're in right now. And a lot of those sums go towards the care of our children in this country. There's so much that's going on relative to child care in our country. Mm-hmm. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me share some statistics with you. Barbados right now accommodates over 85,000 children aged 0 to 18 in our healthcare system. They seek out services across the 9 polyclinics and, of course, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is our primary tertiary care facility. On an annual basis, Madam Deputy Speaker, the QH Accident and Emergency Department attends to 8,800 pediatric cases, with 2,000 children being admitted to the pediatric ward for conditions such as asthma, sickle cell disease, diabetes, and gastrointestinal issues. 8,800 pediatric cases per year going through the accident and emergency. And the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is asking where are the taxpayers' dollars going at the QH. 8,800 pediatric cases per year. 85,000 children being taken care of at this across our healthcare network, at the polyclinics, at the hospital. 85,000. This healthcare system is taking care of our children. So whilst this bill is protecting, as I said, those few vulnerable children who are in need of care and protection by the state, this administration continues to put significant resources behind the child care of our children altogether, the well-being of our children. Services that are offered to our children. We're ensuring the well-being of our children from birth to adolescence, Madam Deputy Speaker. And some key components of this relate to our Well Babies Clinic. This is where infants attend our polyclinics to get their regular checkups. They go there not only for their regular checkups to see their weight, to make sure that they're developing at the rate and at the pace that they're supposed to develop at, but they also get their immunizations, etc., as they go to their well baby clinics as well. They also get general pediatric care there, evaluation, diagnosis, and management of common childhood illnesses and conditions such as respiratory illnesses and infections, skin problems, and even allergies. Of course, it gets more serious because we have persons who have diabetes, obesity, developmental delays, and of course, a very important one, suspected cases of assault and neglect, which then comes into contact with this piece of legislation in terms of child protection. Nutritional counseling as well. All of this is what we are doing to, as we said, to take care of the children who are our future. And we're making sure we're investing not only in their protection, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, not only in their protection, but we're also making sure we're taking care of their health care and their welfare so that all together they can develop into who they're supposed to be. Health education, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm winding down. Immunizations. And I think I'm actually going to not pause, but I'm going to reflect on the immunizations because I see this as one of the pressing challenges that we're facing as a country going forward. Madam Deputy Speaker, for many years, we have been very successful in our immunization strategies in this country. Very, very successful. Some of the basic immunizations that we've been getting for many, many years now relate to measles, mumps, and rubella, tetanus, hepatitis B, influenza type B, pneumococcal disease, rotavirus, among others. These are, you can call me Dr. Ishmael, if you please. I'm not. But I spend some time around some doctors, like I pick up the language. But Madam Deputy Speaker, on a serious note, we have done a very good job over the years of managing immunizations well, and immunizations have helped us as a nation because the more children that we get immunized, the more of our population that is immunized against some of these very serious diseases and illnesses, the more we protect the whole population. But what we have found in recent years, since COVID-19 really, we have seen that there has been a hesitation relative to the standard immunizations. I'm not talking even about the COVID-19 vaccine now. I'm talking about the other vaccines that have been around for many, many decades and have been trusted. I want to encourage the people of Barbados. In the same way that we are protecting and providing protections for the vulnerable children who need care and protection with this legislation, I want to encourage all parents. If you know you have not given your children the opportunity to be vaccinated against these basic illnesses and these long-term illnesses that we've had, chronic illnesses that we've had across the world, I want to encourage every parent to get up to date with the vaccination schedule that has been approved by the government of Barbados. It is in our best interest, our collective interest, as a country to ensure that we do such. And as I close, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to highlight another area of protection of our children, which is the Albert Cecil Graham Development Center. And this takes care of children with disabilities, children who have developmental challenges, children, a wide range of reasons why they may come into contact with the Albert Cecil Graham, from speech impediments or learning developmental issues, etc. And I have met with the team of the Albert Cecil Graham Development Center on many occasions, and we are in the process of fixing many of the issues that we've seen over the years relative to this particular, a very important aspect of our overall child healthcare system. And just to mention two as I wrap up. One is the pool. We have a pool there that was used for physiotherapy. It has been out of commission for a little while. We're in the process of getting that back up and running so that the children of this nation will be able to do their physiotherapy within the pool, which will advance and accelerate their recovery and allow them to be able to get to a place where they're more stable and they'll be able to function even more effectively within this society. And then two, we're in the process of dealing with our speech therapy situation. Madam Deputy Speaker, the people of Barbados are aware that we have a very long waiting list, unfortunately long, regrettably long waiting list when it comes to speech therapy, and that's because we only have one speech therapist in the public system. And we're working on that. We're creating additional posts, yes, but attracting people to the posts has also proven to be a challenge. But my team and I, we have been working on some additional strategies, alternative approaches that would allow us to be able to bring in some additional support that would allow us to be able to reduce that waiting list and that backlog when it comes to speech therapy. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I close, I want to give my unreserved, unwavering support to this legislation. I believe it is transformational. I believe it is important. As I said, if it was only one child in Barbados that needed to be protected and to benefit from this legislation being on the statute books, I think it would have been a job well done by this administration to bring it to bear. Madam Deputy Speaker, with those few words, I'm obliged.
Most welcome.
Honourable for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I felt it incumbent to lend my voice for two reasons tonight. First of all, as a former Minister of Youth, and of course, as the MP who not only represents the fulcrum of Christchurch, but a constituency that has a number of young people in it. And I just want to say tonight that my heart goes out to my good friend Omar Haynes and his family. He lost his life last night, and I want to extend my condolences and ask God's strength and guidance to his family. Mr. Speaker, I want to start by reflecting on the words of Hubert Humphrey, the former, and there may be a lineage here, the former Vice President of America, who said that the moral test of any government is how it treats to its most vulnerable. The moral test. Those in the dawn of their lives, our children, those in the twilight of their lives, and those that are particularly special to me, the elderly, and those, of course, in the shadows of their life, those who may be suffering from sicknesses, ill health, and of course, the disabled or the persons who have challenges in terms of being handicapped or otherwise. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, with the plans that you heard this morning exposed by the Member of Parliament of St. Michael's South, the plans that he has brought to this House as it relates to the elderly and the disabled community. And now this morning, we heard a sedulous presentation as it relates to the plans to protect the most vulnerable as it relates to our children. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, without a doubt, that this government has passed that moral litmus test. And I want to proudly associate myself with this piece of legislation. And what does it do, Mr. Speaker, sir? It allows us not only to protect those in the dawn of their life from imminent danger and situations which will cause them harm, but it allows us to construct a way of dealing with present dangers and threats. And that is important, Mr. Speaker. So you're not only looking at the threats in the horizon, but Mr. Speaker, and of course, those threats would involve those associated with new technologies. But Mr. Speaker, sir, we are looking at present threats. And the record is there to show why this legislation is as important as we deem it is to bring it 120 years or so after the last piece of legislation to protect our children of this country. And why is that, Mr. Speaker? Between the year 2023 and 2024, we had 657 children being reported as under immediate threat of abuse. 657 children, over 500 cases. And those were the cases and children that were reported. We're not talking about the unreported, the undocumented. We are talking about the reported cases of children being abused in this country. Whether it is sexual, whether it is physical, whether it is domestic abuse, it could be neglect, Mr. Speaker, sir, or abandonment. 657 cases. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to declare today that if it was one case for this government that I associate myself with, it is one case too many. And that is why this legislation is so important. The lived reality, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that children are exposed to all types of vulnerabilities. All types of vulnerabilities. And we have a duty, not only as a government, we have a duty as a country, as a society, as a community, to protect our children. The Member of Parliament for St. Michael North just said that they are the future. They are the future of our country. They are the ones who will sit here the next couple of years and stand in this chamber to represent this country. Those are the ones that will fly the flag of Barbados around the world. Those are the ones, those impressionable children will someday be the world leaders that we expect them to be. But the only way this can happen is if we put measures and legislation in place to protect them, to ensure that their well-being is taken care of. And that is why we are here, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are here because it is our mandate to protect, to serve, and to ensure that those success stories could be realized. That is why we are here. We are not here to be involved in semantics and theatrics. We are here to do the business for the good people of this country. And one of those important dimension and aspect of doing the work for the people of this country is to protect our children. And we make no apologies. We make no apologies to put our hands up and be counted for. We make no apologies for that, Mr. Speaker. But we are in a strange society. And sometimes I wonder if we are operating in a distant world from the realities that we are faced. When you can hear the naysayers and fearmongers, when you can hear it after a bill was exposed to and it invited the comments from all and sundry. You can hear persons, Mr. Speaker, sir, because this is the lived reality. When you can hear persons from calling programs to social media platforms say that a bill, a piece of legislation that has as its core the protection of children from imminent and present danger, that this bill, by an abracadabra moment, is going to change the sex of a child. When you can hear that in a society, Mr. Speaker, or it can make a child become transgender. I think if that is not abracadabra medical moment, I don't know what is. And I want to say that, Mr. Speaker, I will put it down to treason. I'm not a lawyer, but it is a form of treason when you can have persons in Barbados, Barbadians and non-nationals, exposing this type of rhetoric. It is a dangerous precedent. And I would say it is one that we need to speak out against, because this is our country. And it is a country that we all should all be proud of. And when you hear this, I call it ignorance walking around on her heel shoes, because that's what it is for me. Ignorance on her heel shoes, because that is what it is. When you hear this folly that a bill can change a male to a female and a female to a male, nonsense. Mr. Speaker, sir, the level of delusion has no boundaries, and I want to associate myself with reality. And the reality is that legislation that seeks to protect children, that provides a secure treatment center. A center, because after an abuse or a situation, a harmful situation is reported, there is a fact-finding exercise that ensues, and thereafter we have provided the solutions. So the bill, as I said, is sedulous. It encompasses all different dimensions, from reporting back down to treatment and solutions. And there is a secure treatment center with these psychosocial inputs from the experts, so we can help fashion a treatment regime that is fit for purpose. Because every case is going to be different, every individual case is going to be different. So we have to provide for the needs of our children based on what they're faced with at an individual level. And that is what we are proposing, a secure treatment center. These are our most vulnerable that we are speaking of. These are the children. We are not talking about big rocks or manna from the sky. We are talking about children, lives. The Member of Parliament of St. Michael North just spoke about what we are doing in terms of the health services, providing those that health facility and that fulcrum, so we can ensure that these same children, that the health is looked after. The Member of Parliament for St. John, because this is a holistic approach of government, spoke from his ministry's perspective, what they are going to be doing with all the programs for young people, from call centers back down to sporting facilities, so that young persons will be able to extend that extra ATP that they have. Mr. Speaker, sir, government will operate in the unsiloed way. My Ministry of the Environment, we will provide, because if you don't have the balancing of humors, environmentally, of course, along with all these social interventions and psychological dynamics, then we will be spending top and mud. And that is not what we are here to do. We are here to provide a holistic approach to solving problems. And as reported, 657 kids. Children. 657. I am saying that if that is not enough to titillate persons in this country to embrace what we are doing here, well, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. I said before, if it is one case, it is one case too many. But we must hold our hands with the people of this country. There's a saying, an old axiom, that says, if you walk in front of people, they might not follow. If you walk in behind, sometimes they may not lead. But this government has said many and many times over that we will walk by the side of Barbadians to ensure we do right on their behalf. And that is why we involve them in the process when we were building out this piece of legislation. We had the consultations at the select committee level. That's what we said, and that's what we did. That's what we said, and that's what we did. So this legislation, Mr. Speaker, because it must be an all-of-country approach if we are going to rescue our children, if we are going to restore confidence in them, and if we are going to allow them to rebuild this country. There must be an all-of-government approach, all-of-country approach, sorry. And I am saying that there is a saying, it's supposed to be an old African proverbs. And I believe it come from it has an ancestral connection to it. And it says that it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to raise a child. And I want to go a little further. It can only take a village. And the only way a village can raise a child, Mr. Speaker, sir, is if the village sees itself as a family. So I am imploring communities across Barbados to become that extended family for our children. And when we are saying things, I am saying to the people in Seville, if you are saying something that is happening adversely to a child in God Hill, you must report it to the authorities. And also, I'm saying to the people in Vauxhall, that if you see a child at home and he's supposed to be at school, you need to inform someone. Or if you see a child on the street doing something wrong, you need to say to that child, this is not the right way. This is the way to do it. Because each one of us must be that extended family. If we appreciate that old African proverb that says, it takes a village to raise a child. Because we believe that in Barbados, we have good people and good responsible people. This, what we are seeing here, with the 657 or so children, this is not certainly the norm. But it is a concern for us, and that's why this legislation is here. Mr. Speaker, I said it will not belabor the House, but I want to say that we have to get serious about our children. We have to appreciate the fact that their success pretty much determines our success as a country. We have to understand and appreciate that they are faced with existential threats beyond sometimes our control for exogenous natures. And of course, we can only do so much. But I believe if we put our efforts together, that we can do right. We can do right by the people of this country. If we work in a collective way. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say in closing that if we nurture the dreams of our children by providing a protective and enabling framework, then the world, by extension, will be blessed. If we nurture those dreams, then the world will be blessed. Inadvertently, if we ignore our responsibilities, if we ignore our responsibility and allow by our actions or inactions the destruction of our children, those at the dawn of society, then the world will come to an abrupt end, a sudden death as they call it. Mr. Speaker, let us not only support this legislation that seeks to allow Barbadians, especially our Barbadian children, to live and feel the Bajan dream, but let us, Mr. Speaker, support all the efforts across the length and breadth of this country to ensure an enabling platform so our children can be the world leaders that we know they can be. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that further debate on the report be postponed.
The question is that further debate on this bill be postponed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, with that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the suspension of the House until Friday, the 16th of May at 10 a.m.
16th? 16th, right? 17th? 17th? 17th.
Friday, the 17th of May at 10 a.m.
The question is that this Honourable Chairman be suspended until Friday, the 17th day of May 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This Honourable Chairman stands suspended until Friday, the 17th day of May 2024 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.